All right, this video is going to be about the Israelites, the chosen people of Yahweh. This book explains it right here. BlackRoots Science by Modimoncho. Great book. I've been having my nose all up in this book. This book gives so much great information. Being an Israelite means that you are a direct descendant of Yakub himself. Yakub is Jacob. But where the confusion comes in and where a lot of religious people don't see the whole picture is that Yakub, known as Jacob in the book of Genesis, is in fact Yahweh. His name is Yakub. He later became known as Yahweh or Yahweh. In Genesis chapter 30, we read that Jacob genetically engineers a new breed of sheep through grafting, selective breeding. This is symbolic of creating the Adamu, the Adamic race. Adam was created through genetic engineering, grafting, right? So Genesis is symbolic. The way a religious person sees it is that Yahweh is the creator of all, and Yahweh is just some mysterious force. And that Jacob is a descendant of Adam, a creation of Yahweh, a grandson of Abraham, who was a prophet. I mean, religious people don't know anything, but we don't want to go out of our way to offend people, So being an Israelite means that you're actually a direct descendant of Yahweh himself, who is Jacob, who is Yakub. I'm going to play the PDF audio of this section, BlackRoots Science by Modimoncho, which gets into the history of the Israelites, the chosen people of Yahweh.
154:33. The true Israelites, the chosen people of Yahweh. C2 Oundless. God eons who ago is the personification B8M original of people all that decided, is good that has part in him her of the purpose of this universe would be to manifest the evil hidden in God, the opposite of every good quality. This comes from the fact that the mind, being limitless in its natural state, cannot have its imaginations suppressed. In other words, whenever the mind thinks of up, it simultaneously thinks of down. Whenever it conceives of long, it instantly conceives of its opposite, short. This is a perfectly natural ability 3. Thus it's also natural that God, who is omnipotent, omniscient and omni-everything else, and who loves to manifest these qualities in the universe, will also, at some point in time, manifest their opposites. The opposite of all God's good qualities can be summed up in one word: self-forgetfulness, or evil as it's commonly called for. These opposites have never been manifested on earth before in all eternity. God is unable to manifest them in his/her natural body, which is perfect. To overcome this limitation, God decided that a new type of human would be made. This human would have the throne of God, the black germ. 255. BlackRoots Science removed from his temple, the physical body. Such a being would soon replace the missing throne with idols of evil. 5. The black germ is the seed of morality. It is the altar upon which God sacrifices divine unity for the sake of individual personality and self-renewal. It is also the seed of creativity. It is to the body what blackness is to fertile soil, or what molasses are to dark sugar. Just as bleached flour, beach sand and white sugar are dead and infertile, so too is a human without the black germ immoral and impotent, i.e. unable to create or prolong life. Just as white sugar without the black molasses is poisonous and disease-causing, so too is a human being poisonous to the planet who is without the seed of morality. This was the type of image the gods decided they had to make in order to bring out the evil in them. 6. I'll describe shortly how the gods prepared to make this man starting 50,000 years ago, and how, when all was ready 6,000 years ago, a god was born on earth by the name of Yahweh, also called Yakub. He gathered about 60,000 volunteers called the Elohim and said to them, "Let us make man in our image." 7. Does this mean that there is only 60,000 plus one original light race gods? 8. There are exactly 60,000. Yahweh Yakub is one of the 60,000. He's singled out by name because he's the leader. They all have individual names, but the entire 60,000 including Yahweh Yakub are called Elohim, which is plural for El, in Hebrew, or Allah in Arabic. 9. So if there are 1 B8M black gods incarnating and 60,000 light race gods incarnating, Who is incarnating in the rest of the people on earth? 10. No one. They are brand new people who have never existed before. And a slight correction. There are not 60,000 light race gods in addition to the B8M gods. There are only one B8M gods on earth, and to call them light race gods would be incorrect. They are black men and women, so they're black gods. The rest of the population are brand new souls. The 60,000 are all black people who created the light races in our image. They are called the 11. 256. The true Israelites. Elohim and traveled in a manner I'll discuss later, to the star Sirius, where they now live. 12. Do the Elohim continue to incarnate on earth, or are the black gods incarnating on earth the 1B8M minus the 60,000 Elohim, who are people gods living on Sirius? Again, I've heard these details before by Dronvalo Mikalek, only he omitted one salient point, the black germ being the throne of God. 13. The original gods who are incarnated on Sirius as the 60,000 are also incarnated here on earth as regular black people like you and me, i.e. as different personalities. See, the B8M gods not only incarnate again and again here on earth, but also simultaneously on other earths throughout the universe. You yourself, as one of the original B8M, are right now also incarnated on Sirius. You have a twin personality there, as does every black person. 17. Yakub Yahweh took the 59,999 volunteers to a secluded island and proceeded to make the 4 light-skinned races whose descendants are all the non-blacks on earth today. This happened 6,000 years ago. 257. 18. The races were made in stages. The first stage took 7 generations, 200 years, of deliberate breeding. It involved starting with black people and getting dark brown children from them. The dark brown children were then encouraged to marry one another and they produced lighter brown children. The people continued this, getting lighter and lighter children until after 7 generations the black germ was completely removed. At that point the first light-skinned race was born. This new race was bred for another 7 generations or 200 years until the second light race emerged from them. Then after another 200 years the third race, the yellow race, came out of the second race. The last race, the white race, came out of the yellow race after only 66 years. Thus the 4 light-skinned races were complete after 666 years. During the breeding of the first race from black people, many black children were born along with them to the same families. In other words, many families that gave birth to dark brown children also gave birth to ordinary black children as their siblings. Many of these black children were murdered on that island. They were killed in order to instill a light-skin supremacy complex among the people of the island. Such a complex was absolutely essential for those people to succeed with their project. However, the instilling of the complex, though necessary for the success of the project, did not have to be achieved through murder, but that is how they did it. There are legends in ancient texts describing the history of this violent time. One such legend is reported in the Old Testament where Pharaoh apparently orders all the firstborn sons of Israel to be killed. This is a garbled legend distorted by Jewish transcribers of the ancient scripts, who replaced the leaders of the island nation with the Egyptian pharaoh. But the original legend describes much more ancient events set in the island called Pelan, and not in Egypt, and it relates to the killing of black children. Even though many black infants perished on that island, not all were killed. Many parents succeeded in hiding their children, and eventually taking them off the island. There are also legends describing how some of the children were removed. A popular legend is the story of how Moses was spirited away behind the reeds of a river hidden in a woven basket. However, Moses was not involved in this desperate adventure, because he was a legendary figure by the time the Old Testament was transcribed. The transcribers used his name to lend emphasis to the story, which actually happened some millennia before Moses was born. 19, 20, 21, 22, 258, 23. Many of the children and their parents and guardians who managed to escape ended up in Northeast Africa and the Middle East. They emigrated mostly to the country today called Israel and Palestine and other nearby locations joined to Africa by a natural land bridge. This land bridge, which today has become the Suez Canal, was used in those days by people traveling between Africa and the Middle East. All the people escaping from the island were the adherents of Yahweh's religion, which he had established for them and their descendants before he died. Among the tenets of the religion was one that some priests claimed had been instituted by him, which in fact was not at all part of his teachings. This was the tenet of child sacrifice. The people who made this false claim were the surgeons, midwives, and other health officials on that island. They made this abhorrent claim, which they falsely attributed to Yahweh, saying that all black children had to be killed in order for the lighter-skinned children to prosper. Their reasoning, which they also falsely attributed to Yahweh, was that if the black children were allowed to live, they would undermine the lighter races and destroy their chances of taking over the world. They reasoned that the black children would overwhelm the lighter-skinned children with their naturally superior intelligence and morality. These qualities were compromised in the light-skinned generations, and the lighter the generation, the more compromised they were. Now, this latter fact was true, that black children could possibly overwhelm the other children, and possibly delay the success of the project. But Yahweh had foreseen this possibility and taken the necessary steps to make sure it would not happen. He had left a plan with the first leaders whereby the black children would be taken off the island and resettled in the Middle East and North Africa. As the years went by, and as the first leaders of Yahweh's generation passed away along with him, the succeeding generations of leaders, who were by now very light-skinned, hatched a plan to start killing black people right there on that island. A plan that they intended to export to the rest of the world in the coming 6,000 years. They lied and said that part of Yahweh's religion involved child sacrifice, which according to them meant to kill every newborn black child. Many people believed these leaders, especially those people that were themselves light-skinned, but the black citizens of the island rejected this false tenet of their religion. The result was that very early on, the island community was divided into two opposing factions. Black people against light-skinned 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 259. BlackRoots Science people. This division gave rise to the first enmity on earth. It was a hostility between brothers, essentially people of the same blood at that early stage before the first light race was born. As the new people became lighter and increased in number, the hostility grew to such an extent that the black residents decided it was best to leave the island. By the time the first light-skinned race was fully formed, all the black people that survived had already emigrated from the island and settled in the Middle East and Africa. The story of the making of the light races is reported in the Bible as the making of Adam and Eve. The enmity that arose between the original black people of that island and their light-skinned brethren is portrayed as the legend of Abel and Cain. 29. Abel represents black people and Cain represents non-blacks. 30. Cain's mark is white skin, by which he would be easily recognized as soon as he left the island and ventured into the cities of the world, which at that time were occupied exclusively by black people. He was cursed so that the ground would never yield good food for him. Everything he got from the ground would be tainted and poisonous. So would the water and the air become poison in his hands. He became a vagabond that left his birthplace and wandered all over the earth, as well a fugitive wanted for committing unspeakable crimes against the black nation. But Yahweh also protected him from being destroyed prematurely, so he could rule the world for the allotted time. 31. The legend of Abel and Cain portrays the first act of hostility to ever occur on earth. Before then, the people of the earth had known only peace. 32. As stated, the most important facet of the animosity between blacks and the light-skinned races was the religious aspect. This continues to this day, but in a form that is so totally different and unexpected that it has deceived all the nations of the world as to its true nature, let alone its true origin. The oldest strife on earth began as animosity between the black inhabitants of the island of Pelan, the descendants of Yahweh and the Elohim, against the light-skinned races that were made there. Today it continues as the hatred between the Semitic tribe of Jews against Arabs and other Semites. 33. The history of how it came to be this way, no longer involving black people, is very long, spanning a period of 4,000 years. The events that actually led to the present state of affairs are themselves very simple and straightforward. 260. The true Israelites. 34. But they happened over such a long period of time that the slow change was not seen until it had been completed. Briefly speaking, it happened in the following way. When black people left the island to avoid having their children murdered, they took their religion with them, given to them by Yahweh. They practiced the religion in their new country where they settled, in the part of the Middle East today called Israel and Palestine. As the millennia went by, after about 2,000 years since black people left the island, the light-skinned races followed them and started settling in the Middle East, including in the land of Israel. Those who settled in Israel-Palestine quickly adopted the culture and religion of the black inhabitants, the original natives of that land. Their culture and religion was far superior to that of the races, and they couldn't help but adopt it. The ancient hatred between them was soon rekindled. After many centuries, the original inhabitants of that area were outnumbered and overwhelmed by the hordes of arriving light-skinned people. Soon they were forced off their land. Some of them emigrated to Egypt, where they were given land by a benevolent Egyptian king of that time. During the time that they shared the land of Israel with the newcomers, the light races, the black inhabitants decided to hide the true practices of their religion from the hordes, who they knew would soon corrupt it. The true religion was thus made secret, and what was left for the masses was just superficial rites and practices. These were adopted by the light races as their religion, and it became the new worship of Yahweh. Around 2,000 years ago, the last group of black people left the land of Israel during the Roman invasion. They crossed the land bridge to join their people in Egypt who had left earlier. Soon thereafter most of these black people, the descendants of Yahweh and the Elohim, migrated south and west into Africa, where they settled among the many African tribes who had been living there for many millennia. Their migration into the African continent occurred at the same time that the natives of Egypt also migrated deeper into Africa. They abandoned their great civilization after the invasion of the Semites and others, mostly Persians, Greeks, and Romans. By this time the religion of Yahweh had gone into such deep secrecy that it was practiced by only a few who were initiated into it. In the meantime, the superficial form of their religion had gained a large following among the Semites who would later be known as Jews. 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 261. BlackRoots Science 40. At the early period of the unfolding of these events, the name Semites did not yet exist. These people were simply known as the second race from the fact that they were the second to be made. But I use the name Semite because it defines them better than any other name in modern times. That race includes all the non-black people of today's Middle East and North Africa, including Pakistanis, Persians, Jews, Arabs, non-black Indians and so on. The Jews corrupted the religion of Yahweh so much that it was barely recognizable by the time of Jesus 2,000 years ago. Today this corrupt version is being practiced in Israel and other places where Jews live and is called Judaism. The other Semites, Arabs, Persians, etc., practice a version of Yahweh's religion that was brought much later by Muhammad. Muhammad, a black man, was visited by one of the Elohim who identified himself as the angel Gabriel, or Gabriel. The word Elohim is the Hebrew plural of the word El or Eloah, which means God. There are 59,999 Els or Elohim, along with their leader Yahweh, making a total of 60,000. In the Bible they are called angels, the most well-known being Gabriel, meaning the God, Gabri. There is also Michael, Michael, Uriel, Uriel, Raphael, Ariel, Ariel, etc. They are the ones that have visited the earth more often than the rest. All of them are gods equal to Yahweh. They are not angels in the Christian sense, where Christians claim that they were created by Yahweh. They are actually Yahweh's brothers and sisters who volunteered to help him make the light races in our image 6,000 years ago. The word angel should be interpreted to mean messenger. Yahweh is their leader and they are his messengers. The Hebrew word Eloah in Arabic is Allah. When Gabriel, or Jibril visited Muhammad 1,400 years ago, he told him that he was sent by the other Elohim and their leader, whom he called Allah, God. Muhammad and his people at that time were speaking a different language, the predecessor of modern Arabic, and no longer understood Old Hebrew names such as Yahweh or Elohim. Gabriel taught him the original, forgotten religion of his ancestors, the religion of Yahweh, which he then called the religion of Allah. A few years after Muhammad established the religion of Allah, It too was adopted by the Semites of that region. They soon abandoned their old religions and adopted Islam. That is how the Semites split into two main groups. The first practicing the old but corrupt religion of Yahweh that they adopted from the original black inhabitants of Israel. They still practice this religion today and call it Judaism. They consider themselves to be the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and ultimately of Yahweh and the Elohim. The 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 262. The true Israelites, 60,000 original black inhabitants of the island of Pelan. But now they claim that all those ancients were white like them. That is the first group of Semites called Jews. The false Israelites, 46. The second group of Semites adopted the religion of Allah, called Islam. They still practice it today in as much a corrupted version as the Jews corrupted the religion of Yahweh. 47. When the ancestors of the modern-day Jews and Arabs took over the religions of Yahweh and Allah, they adopted the history that goes with those religions, as much as was available to them. The rest they filled with fabrications, which are rampant in the Old Testament nonetheless. This includes the history of the first animosity to ever occur on earth depicted in the legend of Abel and Cain. This legend was reformulated later. It is depicted in the story of the sons of Noah, Shem and Ham, and their descendants. The Jews have taken one side of this animosity and the Arabs and other white Muslims have taken the other side. So today we have the incredible situation where the Jews and white Muslims fight one another. The Jews believing they are the true Israelites, and the others believing they are their original enemies. 48. As stated before, the original strife started on the island of Pelan between the black inhabitants and the light-skinned races. It is this very same animosity that now exists between Jews and Muslims, having been appropriated by them due to an unprecedented misinterpretation of historical facts, fed by the practicing of two superficial religions, Judaism and white Islam, which are corruptions of the original religion of Yahweh or Allah. 49. That in brief is the history of how this second light-skinned race, the Semites, stole the legacy of the true Israelites that is recorded in the Quran, the Old Testament Bible, and other ancient texts. 50. The descendants of the 60,000 Elohim continued to practice the true religion of Yahweh after they left the island. They were scattered by wars all over the Middle East and North Africa. A small number of them were left in Israel until about 2,000 years ago, when they were forced off that land by the Roman invasions. The rest were already in Africa, having migrated into the continent over the course of many centuries. After settling among other Africans, the descendants of Yahweh kept their religious practices separate from the religions of other African tribes. 51. There was no physical difference between them and other Africans, but they were distinguished by their religion. They were known as the worshippers and descendants of the god of Sirius, even as their other brethren, the Dogon people, are still known today. The fact that the Israelites separated themselves, 263 religiously from other Africans caused some measure of resentment in the people who had been living in Africa longer and worshipping older gods. The ill feelings were nevertheless not deep enough to cause violent hostilities between them. But this religious exclusiveness of the Israelites worked against their favor when Caucasians and Arabs entered Africa later on and introduced the evil form of trade called slavery. The Israelite Africans, due to living in small communities spread over many African countries, became easy targets for slave hunters. They were hunted and captured mostly by the light races. But in some instances non-Israelite African chiefs made wicked deals with the white slavers to capture the Israelites and sell them in order to save their own tribe's people. This unfortunate situation resulted in the Israelites being the most enslaved of all Africans. The entire Israelite nation was captured and enslaved out of Africa except only two tribes that managed to avoid enslavement. One of these is the Dogon tribe of Mali, and the other are the Israelites who managed to settle on the eastern and southern parts of Africa, away from the slave trade routes. The rest of the Israelites, consisting of 10 tribes, were almost all removed by force and enslaved in the Americas, Britain, Europe, and some Arab countries. Their religion was disrupted at that time to such an extent that shortly after they arrived in the Americas, they totally forgot it. The few who still practiced it died without being able to teach it to their children because of the severe restrictions placed on them by their Caucasian Slavers. Thus, after only a couple of generations in the diaspora, their religion had totally perished. They became known to their African and Asian relatives as the lost tribes of Israel. It was said that they would be lost and forgotten for 400 years, exactly as predicted in the ancient writings of their ancestors, the Hebrews. The Israelites were not the only Africans enslaved. Non-Israelite Africans were also enslaved at the same time. After they had all been in slavery for about 2 generations, they all lost their cultures and religions, except for isolated small groups here and there who kept the flames alive at great cost of life and limb. The Slavers separated the people in such a way that they had no common languages, even to the point of separating children from their mothers. As a result of this, there was widespread intermarriage between Israelite and non-Israelite African slaves. This caused an increase in the Israelite population. In other words, when a non-Israelite African slave married an Israelite, their children naturally became Israelites either through the mother or father. The Elohim considered such children to be their descendants, and they 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 264 were recorded as such in the Book of Life by the angels of Yahweh, who are responsible for keeping track of all the births of their descendants. 57. So widespread was intermarriage between the two groups that today, practically all black people of slave descent in the diaspora are the descendants of Yahweh and the Elohim. 58. And now 400 years later, the 10 lost tribes of Israel have been found. They are today's black people of the diaspora who are the descendants of slaves. They are the true Israelites, the chosen people of Yahweh. About 6,000 years ago, their ancestors were forced off the island of Pelan in the Mediterranean, into Israel and then into Africa. Many millennia later, they were forcefully taken out of Africa and enslaved in foreign countries. They are chosen not because of an arbitrary or mystical reason given by a non-existent spirit god. The reason they are the chosen people is because they are the direct descendants of Yahweh and the Elohim. 59. 15,000 years ago, about 9,000 years before Yahweh was born, the king of the earth built the structures in present-day Giza, Egypt, known as the Great Pyramids. There are 3 of these pyramids, symbolically representing the leadership of our nation, the elders, chiefs, and judges. The first to be built was the smallest one. It is the most sacred of the 3 and represents the 24 elders. The second one in the middle represents the 144 chiefs, and the largest one represents the 144,000 judges. The Great Pyramids were built to have 7 functions. Their highest function had to do with the facilitation of divine unity during certain important rituals. Their lowest function was as generators and distributors of energy for the great civilization of the ancient Ethiopian Egyptian kingdom. Another one of their uses is important in these discussions. They were used as resurrection machines. This particular function was built into their construction in anticipation of the birth of Yahweh, the god of the light races. They were used to transport the souls of the 60,000 gods, Yahweh and the Elohim, to the star Sirius. Yahweh and his angels died at a time when black people no longer ascended consciously. At the time they were born, our ancestors had already deteriorated their bodies for about 44,000 years, making it difficult for people of his generation to die without losing consciousness. Since then, all people who die lose consciousness at the moment of death. Some regain it quickly, others sleep for a long time before realizing that they are dead. 60, 61, 62, 63, 265. BlackRoots Science. 64. Before Yahweh's time, all people died by willingly laying their bodies down at the end of their life and consciously ascending to the minds of the elders. That was the time before the mass exodus of people who deliberately isolated themselves from civilization. Their bodies were still perfect then. They all lived to be around 7,000 years old. They stopped aging when they were between 16 and 28 years old. Senior citizens, those older than 6,000 years, appeared to be between 25 and 28 years of age. All other adults who were under 6,000 years of age appeared to be between 16 and 25 years old by modern looks, except that they were much taller and incomparably more beautiful. Their skin color was the smoothest, deepest black. The men were about 7.5 feet tall on average, and the women a few inches shorter. 50,000 years ago, when the decision to make the light races was finalized, black people started to deliberately change their bodies. The bodies of our ancestors have a genetic perfection that makes it impossible to suppress the dominant black germ and allow the recessive light germ to surface. In all of eternity, the light germ had never surfaced before. Therefore, black people knew of albinos only as a possibility, and had seen them only in their imagination during rituals directed to that type of teaching. They had never seen an actual albino in the flesh, as none had ever been born before. To allow for the necessary suppression of the black germ, they decided to genetically alter their bodies and cause a deterioration that would enable the dominant black germ to be easily suppressed and give way to the appearance of the recessive light germ. Now, all things in the body are a manifestation of the 144,000 aspects of God's perfect character. Any type of genetic manipulation of the body is ultimately achieved by controlling one or more of the 144,000 aspects of morality. In a perfect society, such as our ancestors had prior to 6,000 years ago, the 144,000 aspects were perfectly balanced, made so by the education of youth in their first 77 years of life. This perfect balance of the body and its aspects resulted in a perfect morality where right and wrong were clearly known. A perfect character or morality results in clear communication with the first self. The clear communication is the cause of the high state of inner guidance that our ancestors enjoyed. Their society was so perfectly balanced and well established that evil or error or self-forgetfulness was impossible to manifest. It's a natural fact that a perfect body and mind and a perfect balance of the 144,000 aspects of character lead to a perfect morality and a perfect society. All of them are mutually inclusive and interdependent. 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71. 266, 72. Hence, in order to genetically alter their bodies, the ancestors had to disrupt their perfect society and cause the imbalance in their character that would result in the necessary genetic change. The ancients decided therefore that in order to corrupt their perfect bodies to allow the recessive light gene to emerge, they had to live far away from their perfect society. They had to move away from civilization and live in surroundings that would cause the necessary genetic mutations needed to enable the deliberate suppression of the black germ. So 50,000 years ago, many people volunteered for a self-imposed isolation. Many people moved from the major cities of the world, away from civilization, into the wild areas of Africa, America, and Asia. Asia and the Americas were geographically different then than they are now. During those days, the large island of Australia was part of a large continent in the Pacific. The Caribbean islands were also part of another continent in the Atlantic. Both continents have since sunk under the oceans, changing those areas of the earth to how they look today. The two continents were occupied in those days by some of the people that volunteered for self-isolation. Those who didn't migrate directly to the wilderness. They set up two distinct civilizations, one in the Pacific region that is called Lemuria or Mu today, and another in the Atlantic region that is called Atlantis today. These two civilizations started off being imperfect. They were based on an imbalance of our 144,000 aspects of morality. As a result, they started to decline only a few thousand years after they were established. The 144,000 aspects of morality are the foundation of God's temple, the human body. The aspects are reflected in our genetic structure by the strands of DNA. Modern scientists have discovered two of these strands. These are the only two that are active in our bodies in this age. Hidden alongside the two are 10 inactive strands of DNA. We have 12 strands of DNA in total. Each strand is the basis or reflection of 12,000 aspects of our creative nature. All 12 strands, when they are all active, account for the entire 144,000 aspects of creativity, or morality. It took about 42,000 years of harsh living in the forests of the earth, away from civilization, for the 10 strands of DNA that were previously active in our perfect ancient bodies to become inactive. That left only 2 active. That is the condition in which our bodies are today. The people of Lemuria and Atlantis established great material civilizations, but they were not destined to last because of the imbalance in the people 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 267. BlackRoots Science that created them. They made an imbalance in themselves by neglecting to practice the major and great rituals of our nation. They soon forgot their true selves, and forgot who God really is. They lost touch with their inner self, their moral guide. Their civilization soon thereafter became excessively materialistic. After about 10,000 years, it quickly began to deteriorate. They were still peaceful people. The aspect of peace in the morality of black people is one of the most tenacious. It's always nearly the last one to be lost in a deteriorating environment. Thus they never fought wars against one another. The decline of their communities was solely due to the imbalance in their morality caused by the neglect of the major rituals, especially the 7 great rituals used to attain divine unity with the first self. 81. This decline in their civilization was accompanied by a decline in their bodies. All things are interrelated. When morality is corrupt, social conditions decline, and this causes mental and physical corruptions of the body. They manifest as genetic mutations, directly affecting and altering the DNA. The decline of their societies was thus slowly but surely accompanied by a stagnation of 10 out of 12 strands of their DNA. 82. After 10,000 years, many of the people of Lemuria had become so imbalanced that the leaders removed them to remote, wild areas. 83. Hence as time went by, they deteriorated from perfect, totally balanced people with 12 active strands of DNA to the point where the lack of use caused 10 of the strands to become inactive. 84. The continued and proper activity of our entire DNA as well as our various glands can be guaranteed only in one way: by taking part in the rituals designed to keep them active. When people stop engaging in these rites, our glands and genes are adversely affected, to the point where they become dormant. 85. In response, their bodies changed drastically, and became short-lived to where their average lifespan was reduced over a period of many millennia to only 60 years. 86. About 21,000 years ago, the first civilization, that of Lemuria, totally collapsed. The continent sank under the ocean after being devastated by natural cataclysms. The people were still wise enough to anticipate this, and they moved to Asia and Africa and joined their other people who had moved there many millennia before. The second civilization of Atlantis lasted about 7,000 years after Lemuria disappeared. It too collapsed about 14,000 years ago, and the continent also sank beneath the ocean. All that is left of 268. The true Israelites. Lemuria and Atlantis are the Pacific Islands and Australia, New Zealand, and the Caribbean Islands. 87. The people anticipated the cataclysms, and had already moved into the forests of Africa, Asia and the Americas, where they joined their brothers and sisters who had moved there earlier. Their bodies continued to deteriorate further due to the harsher living conditions. Those among them that started hunting and eating meat were the most affected. In Africa and Asia primarily, some of the people deteriorated to the point where they became almost entirely new beings. Their remains that have been found are wrongly dated by the unreliable modern dating methods and classified by modern scientists as distinct species, such as Homo erectus. 88. While on this point of the different human species, let me add that no black people deteriorated to the point where they actually lost their humanity. This is impossible because even in the worst biological stage, such as that of Homo erectus, the mind of God was still incarnated in them. They had lost almost all communication with the first self, but not entirely. They had enough conscience in them that they were still moral human beings. 89. A different scenario happened in Europe many thousands of years later after the light-skinned races had been made. It gave rise to today's human-like apes. These apes came about as a result of the deterioration of the human bodies of white people who were expelled into the mountains and caves of Europe. They were expelled from civilization by the black citizens of the cities in the Middle East and North Africa. They were isolated beyond the Caucasus Mountains, where they were totally cut off from culture and civil life. Over a period of only 2,000 years, They deteriorated so much that some of them completely lost their humanness and became what are called Neanderthal. Others declined even further until they crawled on hands and feet and became human-like apes, such as can be seen today. These human-looking apes are the descendants of those people from about 4,000 years ago. I mention this so that the distinction is clear as to where the different human-like species came from. 90. Other black people deteriorated to the condition of the people still alive today called Aborigines, like the San and Khoi, Hottentots, the Bombuti and Twa, Pygmies, and Maori, Australian Aborigines. 91. Now, those were the extreme cases. The vast majority of self-isolated black people, even those who lived under severe conditions in the forest, deteriorated only to the point that we are in today. They became the new 269. BlackRoots Science people of the earth. When Yahweh was ready to make the light races, he invited some of these new people to be his helpers. 92. At the beginning of the period of self-isolation, the ancients decided that they would gradually depopulate the earth of all the perfect people, and repopulate it with the new people. They did this in two basic ways. All the people who wanted, volunteered to leave the ancient cities. They moved to the new cities of Lemuria and Atlantis. Others who desired the immediate experience of a totally new type of existence moved directly to the forests of Africa, South America, and Asia. They soon became food gatherers, and after several centuries, many of them became hunters and meat-eaters. Their new lifestyle, especially the killing of animals and meat-eating, contributed greatly to the fast deterioration of their once perfect bodies. 93. The rest of the isolationists, those who moved to the new cities of Lemuria and Atlantis, had the same experience but at a much slower pace. When their civilizations ended many thousands of years later, they too moved to the forests and joined their people who had been there a long time. This accelerated their deterioration until all the groups of isolationists had lost 10 out of 12 strands of their DNA. They became a new type of people, such as we are today. 94. During that approximately 44,000-year period, the ancients who remained in the original cities decided to reduce their population, in order to complete the transformation from a world of perfect people to a different world full of new people. They did this by slowing down their reproduction of children gradually over a period of 6 generations, or about 42,000 years. 95. By the time of the birth of Yahweh, no perfect people were being born on earth. All the senior citizens who were left soon died. Eventually, at around 6,000 years ago, the only perfect people left on earth were the long-lived leaders, the 24 elders and the 144 chiefs. The last group of judges passed away at the time of the birth of Yahweh. Today the 168 leaders are the only people left on earth still with the perfect ancient type of bodies with 12 active strands of DNA. 96. About 1,000 years before the birth of Yahweh, some of the new people started to gradually move back to the ancient cities. In a period of less than 1,000 years, they had resettled the major cities of the world that had been evacuated by their ancestors more than 40,000 years before. 97. Yahweh was born to the new people. He had a body very much like ours today, with only 2 active strands of DNA. The 59,999 Elohim that he invited to help him were also the same type of people. 270. The true Israelites. 98. So 6,000 years ago the whole world was exclusively inhabited by black people with 2 active strands of DNA, and also by 168 long-lived leaders with perfect original 12 DNA bodies. They still remain perfect to this day. The world was thus ready for the breeding of the light-skinned races. 100. One more note on the relationship between the physical body and everything that is manifested outwardly in creation. Everything that exists in creation has a counterpart in the physical body. Creation is an outward projection of the human body. More correctly, it's the projection of our ancient 12 DNA perfect bodies. 102. So the physical body is the microcosmos from which is projected the macrocosmos, the universe, using the mind. Ultimately, everything is a projection of the mind, but the mind is anchored in the physical body, and has 144,000 anchor points. These anchor points are the foundation of all creativity in that all things are the physical manifestation of the 144,000 aspects of God's perfect morality. The aspects are centered on God's throne or altar in the body, which is the black germ, the center of all creativity. 103. When the ancients spoke, they sometimes spoke interchangeably about things within and things without as if they are one and the same. In truth, they are one and the same. Everything outward is a reflection of something inward. So in ancient texts they speak of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. These are real people, as already explained. They are the modern black descendants of slaves. But their reflection in the human body are the 10 inactive strands of DNA. The 12 active strands represent or are reflected by the 12 tribes of the black nation in our natural state. Prior to and after this 6,000-year cycle, the 10 inactive or lost strands of DNA represent or are reflected by the 10 lost tribes of Israel. 104. The lost tribes of Israel were found by a certain black man who lived in the Middle East. This man had an epiphany, a revelation. He was doing research back in the late 1800s on the history of black people when one day it suddenly occurred to him that the black people in America, the descendants of slaves, were actually the lost tribes of Israel, his brothers and sisters. He became determined at that time to reclaim his lost people. His revelation was confirmed soon thereafter by the elders of his tribe. They told him that it was his destiny to reclaim our people. That's why the revelation had come to him. Because of his lack of a Western education and inability to speak English, he could not come to America himself to reclaim them. He formulated a plan to raise a son and teach him Western education, and send him to America for this important mission. 99, 101, 271. BlackRoots Science. 105. He raised a son and named him Farad. Thus in the early part of last century, Farad or Fard Muhammad came to America and told the people whom he called his aunts and uncles that they had been lost and now were found. 106. Shortly before Fard's arrival in America, there began a new reverse mutation in the genes of black people. 107. All biological changes on Earth are the direct result of the thoughts of people. When animals and plants mutate into new forms or functions, they are simply reflecting the state of mind of the people on Earth who happen to be wielding that influence, which directs the biological life to mutate and evolve in a particular direction. When the true Israelites were found, there was great joy in heaven among Yahweh's angels, as well as on earth among those initiated into the spiritual events of our earth. The joy that flooded the subconscious minds of all black people when Fard Muhammad's mission was revealed for the first time among the initiated elders in 1912, was so great that it reverberated throughout the entire black nation and caused the beginning of a reverse mutation in our deteriorated genes. 108. Over the following 100 years or so, starting in 1912 until 2014, the 10 inactive strands of our DNA will become active again. After a period of 49 years since the beginning of the reactivation, the first group of genetically different children were born on Earth. This happened on the spring equinox day of 1961, spring in the Northern Hemisphere. Since about March 20, 1961, all black children born have been different than all the previous generations of the past 6,000 years. The reverse mutation is progressing steadily in their bodies as they grow, and will reach a definite plateau when they reach the age of 49 years old in 2010. In that year, the 10 formerly stagnant strands of their DNA will begin to vibrate back into activity. There will be a definite physical and mental difference between those black people and others born before March 1961. All black children born during and after the year 2012 will be physically different right from birth. Their genetic structure will clearly show 12 strands of DNA as opposed to 2 in all other people. 109. Now, when the king built the Great Pyramids, he incorporated the function of resurrection in them in anticipation of the time when black people would have lost the 10 strands of DNA. They were no longer able to ascend consciously. Prior to 6,000 years ago, especially prior to 50,000 years ago, black people ascended consciously. When they died, they never lost consciousness. To them death was just like sleep, which they also experienced. 272. The true Israelites lucidly accept that death was the final sleep. but there was no loss of consciousness like we have today either in sleep or death. 110. Yahweh and the Elohim must remain conscious without the interruption of their memories by the process of unconscious death. The mechanics of death in this 6,000-year cycle are such that conscious memory is interrupted at the moment of death, and has to be rebuilt after ascension, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly depending on the person. The light races were conceived in Yahweh's mind, and actually live and have their being supported directly by that part of his mind they call their collective unconscious. For him to successfully complete his creation, he cannot enter a state of unconsciousness such as comes at the moment of death. He and his helpers, the Elohim, must remain conscious at all times for the sake of their creation. But since Yahweh and the rest of the 60,000 Elohim were born at a time when black people were short-lived and no longer ascended consciously, a way had to be made to ensure the uninterrupted continuation of their individuality, or their souls. Hence the king incorporated this function of conscious ascension, or resurrection in the Great Pyramid. 111. Modern Egyptologists have discovered that at least one of the chambers of the Great Pyramid has passages aligned toward the star Sirius. They have also discovered in the art of the ancient Egyptians, scenes depicting the worship of that star, or the god of that star. Included in many paintings are scenes where the pharaoh is shown as the resurrected Osiris, the god of Sirius. 112. In order to explain this symbolism, we must prepare our minds to grasp and understand some of the practices of our ancestors that were perfectly normal to them, but that would appear miraculous to us today. There are many such activities, to mention some of which would stretch our incredulity to the limit. Such activities were not at all miraculous to them, but were natural and performed as a matter of course. 113. One such activity involves the interrelationship between alternate souls, or what may be called twin souls. Twin souls are not the same as soulmates. They are souls or personalities of the same God. As stated before, the B8M gods not only incarnate repeatedly on Earth, but they simultaneously incarnate on every Earth inhabited by black people. All the simultaneous incarnations of the same God are what we mean by twin souls. Every black person on Earth has a twin soul on the star Sirius, as well as on every other inhabited Earth in the universe. 273. 114. All the attributes that were real that led to miraculous acts by the ancients are still in us, in a dormant or semi-dormant state. They also exist in the light races, but they are mostly turned inside out or upside down, so to speak. They manifest in the opposite of what they should be. 115. An example relevant to this discussion is the condition found mostly in white people called multiple personality syndrome. This is a psychological disorder where a person loses his present sense of identity and takes on a totally different one. When he comes out of it, he doesn't remember anything that happened. This psychotic condition is a reverse shadow of a real attribute that was common to all black people prior to 6,000 years ago. Especially prior to 50,000 years ago, all black people in ancient days had multiple personalities. The reason being the following. All black people that are incarnated here on Earth, meaning you and me, we are also incarnated on trillions upon trillions of other Earths in the universe. There are two ways to visit other star systems in the universe. One is to go there physically, and the other is to go mentally. It's much easier, or at least it was in ancient days, to travel mentally. Traveling across space physically can be done in one of two ways, either by use of an interstellar spacecraft, or by dematerializing the body and rematerializing it at the chosen destination. Both methods are used by Yahweh and the Elohim, and were also used in ancient times. But by far the most common way to travel was by mental transportation. All the personalities of each god that are incarnated in various star systems act as hosts to those traveling mentally. They make their bodies available to such visitors. In other words, when a person travels mentally to another planet, he/she finds his/her twin personality on that Earth who then acts as a host, and uses his mind and body. In modern rituals such travel still goes on to a limited extent. The host in such a ritual is called a gatekeeper. The same principle applies when an initiate travels to the past. He/she finds a gatekeeper, a past incarnation of his/her first self who was a twin personality at that time. During the visit, the host or twin soul takes on the personality of the visitor, and becomes him/her in the fullest sense of the word. In modern times, if such a visitation were to occur outside the safe space of a ritual, such a phenomenon would be called a possession. The host behaves and thinks exactly as the visitor would. He literally becomes him. 119. Since every god has innumerable simultaneous incarnations, every black person is potentially a multiple personality of the highest order. This attribute 116, 117, 118, 274. The true Israelites was as normal to the ancients as changing clothes is to us. The perversion of this attribute in modern bodies and minds is the cause of today's psychosis called multiple personality syndrome. 120. When an inhabitant of another planet hosts a visitor in this way, he/she does not lose or forget her own identity. He remains perfectly conscious, but stays in the background of his own mind as an observer. In other cases he may also depart his own body and go on a visit to another part of the universe, in which case the first self is left in charge of his body, hosting the visitor. When the visitation is over, the visitor has had the benefit of a body by which he could investigate another world, but he also contributes his own experiences to the host, such that the visitation is mutually beneficial to both twin souls. That's how the ancients traveled to other stars and back in time. After we lost most of our DNA, we lost the ability for such travel, except in the ritual setting of initiation. 121. By incorporating the function of conscious resurrection in the Great Pyramid, the leaders made it possible for Yahweh and the Elohim to travel as the ancients used to do to the star Sirius. They were taken at the moment of their death and placed in a sarcophagus, a stone coffin, in the chambers of the pyramid. When each person approached natural death, his or her conscious mind or soul was transported to that star. There they found a host or twin personality waiting for them, and they joined the other Elohim who had been resurrected before them. After a few dozen years, all 60,000 Elohim, including Yahweh, had been transported in this manner. 122. They now occupy 60,000 long-lived bodies of the people of Sirius, and have been for the past 6,000 years. When they are engaged in ordinary activities on their planet, they take on their native personalities. Their Earth personalities go into the background as observers. But when they meet concerning matters that have to do with our Earth, they naturally assume their Earth personalities. They become as they knew themselves here on Earth before their death. 123. This multiple personality feat of the gods is depicted in ancient Egyptian art where the god Osiris or the goddess Isis is shown standing behind or beside the pharaoh or the queen. Pharaoh and the queen represent each Elohim and his/her soulmate as they were on earth in their old bodies. Osiris and Isis represent them as they are today in their long-lived bodies in their new home. When the present cycle ends, it will become normal again for people to visit their twins on other Earths, and to host them in their bodies here on Earth. 275. BlackRoots Science 124. During this intervening 6,000 years of diaspora, Yahweh and his angels traveled on numerous occasions in their spaceships from Sirius to visit their chosen people on Earth. Prior to the time of Christianity, they came here openly. Many instances of their visits are recorded in the Old Testament as well as in the old legends of some tribes. A well-known legend is that of the Dogon people of West Africa, who report that the gods came from Sirius to visit their ancestors. After the birth of Christianity, Yahweh and the Elohim stopped coming openly to Earth. Their visits became rare and only to a few people. The reason is because when Christianity became widespread, the Christians began teaching the lie that God is a spirit. Anyone who appeared in the skies in a chariot or a cloud, as the spaceships were called, was considered to be of the devil. Around the same time, they started painting the devil as a black colored being, instead of white as had been done before. 126. People naturally started to become afraid of such visitations. Anyone who reported space beings was persecuted or even put to death. Eventually Yahweh stopped coming regularly to Earth to avoid putting individuals at risk. The situation was made worse 600 years later when white Islam became widespread. They also taught of a false spirit god, and persecuted anyone who came in contact with a true, living human God. Thus Yahweh and the Elohim have for the most part been absent from their people for 2,000 years. All this was destined to happen. It was predicted many millennia ago in the ancient writings of the Hebrews. But now the time of Yahweh's separation from his people has come to an end. The coming few years will be the time of Yahweh's people, the true Israelites. Some of them will return to their homeland of Israel, Palestine. There they will set up a holy government under their rightful ruler and God, Yahweh, that will last for 1,000 years. The light-skinned races will obey and serve them until every imbalance caused by them and their ancestors in the last 6,000 years has been made right. The world will be brought back to its balanced condition in preparation for the true King and God of the earth, the leader of the 24 elders, who will rule after Yahweh for the remainder of his 25,000-year period. 125, 127, 128. Hello brother African Root, I'm trying to understand why the B8M wanted to manifest the opposites of God. Does it have anything to do with them wanting to knowledge they had of self? Experience the 276. The true Israelites 129. The reason is because all things are contained in God, both the positive good things and all their opposites. God is fearless. He/she wills to experience all that is in him her 130.